Now,
I want to ask a bit more about housing, if I may. I also want to ask about children, because it's very interesting.
The Shadow Justice Minister, Lord Bark, talking to clients and workers at an advice centre run by the Brighton Housing Trust last week. He was there to hear their views on the Legal Aid Sentencing and Punishment of Offenders Bill, which peers debated for the first time on Monday. One of the key worries about the bill is that it will deprive vulnerable people of early legal advice on issues like benefit entitlement or debt, with dire consequences. One client at the advice centre, a lady named Daphne, told me how she'd become ill and found herself unable to keep up the payments on a loan she'd taken out.
This has gone on for 10 years. The debt has been sold to 6. This last one was the 7th debt collection company who were phoning me all times of the day and night. It got that I was a trembling wreck. Couldn't answer the phone, I couldn't answer the front door, and I was just not sleeping, not eating, and just didn't know what to do with myself. I mean, somebody mentioned suicidal and I contemplated it, and a friend of mine's cousin said, we'll go to BHT and get them to help you, which I did, and I came up here and Nick was wonderful, and within 2 weeks he'd written letters to these people. The time limit thing was up, like, after 6 years, and they got no right to phoning me and asking me for it, and they wrote the debt off. So a 10-year headache was literally lifted off my shoulders in 2 weeks.
Daphne's case was funded through legal aid, delivered via the Brighton Housing Trust's Advice Centre. Welfare advisor Lucy Evans says they provide excellent value to the taxpayer.
We're really cheap. Our cases are paid £150 each, regardless of the length of them. And £150 with a normal solicitor won't get you more than 10 minutes. It's very cheap, and it saves a lot of money in the long run because of, costs to health service and things like that.
But the government plans to cut back the burgeoning legal aid budget by restricting the types of cases for which legal aid can be claimed. Many peers fear that advice might not be available again in cases like these. And when the bill was debated on Monday, the Justice Minister, Lord McNally, launched a preemptive defence.
Our proposals seek to put focus legal aid funding on circumstances where a person's life or liberty is at stake, where they're at risk of serious physical harm, or where they face immediate loss of their home. Importantly, we are also retaining civil legal aid in cases where children may be taken into care. The net effect of all this is significant change. Yet, in all, my lords, we estimate that the taxpayer will still be spending the best part of £1.7 billion on legal aid each year after these reforms have been carried through.
He said access to justice for all was not the same thing as giving people access to state-funded lawyers for whatever they want, whenever they want.
We remain clear about the need to make hard choices and fundamental reforms in our justice system. If we get this right, the prize is a justice system that contributes to a safer and fairer society by tackling reoffending and by putting the victim at the heart of everything we do. Moreover, it will be a system that protects access to justice where it counts, while keeping costs under control and ensuring the system has less waste and less delay. Our aim has always been to propose a balanced package, and I can tell the House that that remains exactly what this is. This is a radical and reforming bill, and I commend it to the House.
But Lord McNally's was almost the only voice raised in defence of the bill in a long debate. And some of his Lib Dem colleagues sounded distinctly uneasy. This was the senior lawyer, Lord Goodhart.
Some other of these changes should, however, not be enacted. The ones in particular which should not be enacted in the bill are those which fail to provide for clinical negligence and family violence. I think these in particular, but not probably the only ones, are something where legal rights are plainly necessary and should continue.
The bill's due for detailed committee stage scrutiny, starting just before Christmas. And Lord Bark says its chilly reception in the Upper House means ministers will have to make changes.
I think the government are in big trouble, not least from their own benches on this issue. Crossbenchers clearly feel very strongly, and Labour obviously is opposed to this part of the bill. What we want to do is to make sure that the bill, or whatever bill it is that leaves the House of Lords, is much better and much fairer, much more in tune with the way in which Britain conducts these things than the present bill.
Of course, Labour too is promising that savings have to be made, and this is a big and fast-growing budget, so shouldn't savings be made from it?
Well, it's not so fast-growing these days, but it is a big budget. I absolutely agree with that, and we, both in government and now in opposition, state quite clearly that there do have to be some cuts in legal aid. But we wouldn't start here.
Where would you start?
We'd start with criminal legal aid, and we had plans. Well, before we left government, we actually published a white paper which suggested that the number of criminal solicitors, for example, who have contracts should be lowered. We would have had many fewer criminal solicitors, they would have had more volume, and they would have been paid less per case. That would have been our way of cutting much, much more money than they're actually going to cut by these attempts to cut this crucial everyday law, social welfare law.
The Liberal Democrat former judge, Lord Thomas of Gresford, has already put down a series of amendments. He fears that if legal advice isn't available to people, they'll attempt to represent themselves.
If you don't have legal representation, you have the claimant turning up in person, and then the judge has to step in and spend an awful lot of time in sorting out what the arguments are on both sides and in making sure that the applicant before him is getting justice. Now, this can be done, but it takes time, and my view is that it's going to clog up the courts completely within a very short space of time.
He wants the Lord Chancellor to have the ability to restore legal aid for different types of cases, as well as to take it away, and he hopes that the restrictions in the bill will be temporary.
We Liberal Democrats are not in the business of politics in order to create smaller government. And as soon as the economy improves, we would want access to justice guaranteed in the way that it has in the past.
So you see some of these restrictions as a temporary expedient to deal with the deficit?
I most certainly do. Hopefully we will move back to a clearer and better system. I'm not saying that everything is perfect at the moment and that we should keep things as they are. All parties have had proposals for reforming the legal aid system as it is, so that the person with a just grievance can get it properly sorted out.
And the detailed work on the bill will begin just before Christmas.